Life-changing opportunities comes only once in several years. Today I will be talking about one such opportunities that I expect coming in the next couple of days. Hello and welcome back to Investment Vitals. Before I proceed, nothing contained in this video is financial advice. This is what I am doing. You are free to choose your own destiny. Also, if you like this video, do hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. With the Bitcoin halving coming up shortly, I expect the Bitcoin price to drop to a level which I believe will be a fantastic buying opportunity. I will be talking about how I am planning for that, my plan, in addition to my reason why I believe this would play out. As we all know, halving of Bitcoin halving happens once every 4 years. The first halving happened in November of 2012. The second one was July of 2016, and the third one, the last one, was 11th of May 2020. The next halving is estimated at around 20th of April 24. We have 31 days left for the next halving. What is of interest is that prior to every halving, Bitcoin price has always fell to levels at which it gives fantastic final buying opportunity at a bargain price. Let me demonstrate this on chart before I move ahead and discuss about my plan. I will, at the end of the video, I will also talk about how previously I had predicted the time duration when buying Bitcoin would be the most beneficial. I believe after November, which was my predicted time last time, this month, which is the end of March and early part of April, will be the last final bargain buying opportunity for Bitcoin investors. This is what I believe. This is not financial advice, of course. As I mentioned, 20th of April 2024 is the now expected deadline for the next expected halving, Bitcoin halving. That is approximately, as we can see, 31 days away. That is 31 bars away. This is a daily candle, so 31 days away. The previous halving, Bitcoin halving, happened in the year of 2020. Let me take you to that point to demonstrate my thought process, calculations that underlie it, and the strategy that I'm making for it. If we go back in time, we can see the previous halving happened on 11th of May 2020. From today's time context, 31 days preceding to this would have been around this part, which would have been on 10th of April 2020. Now, what is of interest to me is in this duration, several things happened, but there's one thing that is unique in every Bitcoin halving cycle, that prior to every Bitcoin halving, Bitcoin price has always gone and touched, either retested or crossed over the 50 days simple moving average. The blue line on this chart is the 50-day moving average that we can see. We saw in 2020, Bitcoin price had rose above, had tested 50-day moving average, collapsed, crossed over, and at one final time it came and retested this at on the first time on 20th of April 2020. I have plotted this on this Excel file here. 11th of May being the halving date and 20 April 2020 being the date it first retested the 50 moving day simple moving average from top. Prior to this, the previous halving was in 2016. Let's go back and look what had happened at that point of time. As people say, history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. And in Bitcoin, as we had seen in past, the timing from its halving has been very coincidental in past. In fact, it was the date from the previous halving that had helped me predict that the bottom would be sometime between October and November. I will be showing that calculation separately, and that we will also use in the next video to compute the next expected peak for Bitcoin in the current cycle. Coming back to 2016, as I mentioned some time back, in 2016, 9th of July 2016 was the date of halving. Prior to this, one more thing I forgot to mention in the chart for 2020 is that once Bitcoin retested the 15 days moving average, it never ever went back to that price level. I'll just go back and should demonstrate it to you. This was the time that I mentioned, 20th of April, when Bitcoin had retested the 50 days moving average from top, this line, and subsequent to this, Bitcoin never went back to test this level, which was around 6,888. This level was never reached in the rest of the Bitcoin history till now. Preceding to this, in 2016, as I mentioned some time back, Bitcoin had tested the 50 days moving average on, just a second, let me go to that date, and we can clearly see it was fairly high from the 50 days moving average. There was one major wick and it tested the 50 days moving average on the 23rd of July 2016. I have plotted that as well. 23rd of July 2016 was the day when Bitcoin tested its 50 days moving average from the top. After that, it rallied significantly that same day after that wick to by around 20% before the halving. The only exception, this is the only exception in all the cycles, that after halving, Bitcoin went ahead and fell below the level of 50 days moving average. This is the only instance in the entire example that I'll be quoting that Bitcoin went ahead below this the level at which it was at 20 days moving average. We'll come and talk about this a little later again. And the last cycle, which is the first halving cycle in which Bitcoin had demonstrated similar behavior, was in the previous halving, which was in 2012. In 2012, as we can see, Bitcoin had gone ahead and tested the 50 days moving average for the first time on 18th of November 2012. That also I have plotted in the chart here as 18 November 2012. Again, as I mentioned, this was the lowest price, and this price was never ever achieved again subsequent to the halving of Bitcoin. So I'll plot this again on the chart here for convenience and reference again. Once this was done, after halving, this price was never tested. Now, I understand, based on this, I believe that Bitcoin will fall to a level of around 57,000 in the next couple of days. I'll come to this a little later, but let me show you the gains that have happened once anybody invested at a point when Bitcoin went ahead to retest its 50 days moving average. If somebody had bought Bitcoin at the 50-day moving average of which was $10 in 2012, the current level here being $10, $10 or $11. Subsequently, Bitcoin went ahead to achieve a peak of $1,163 which was a gain of 10,573%. that I'll show it in the chart just now in a second. The peak of Bitcoin after testing the 50 days moving average was in here. It was on, no sorry, this is not the peak. The peak was at a later stage here at the peak was at 1,163, as you can see at the top of the screen here. The peak was 1,163. I have plotted this in the chart here. That gives a gain of 10,573%. Now let's look at the next halving that happened in 2016. Again, moving forward in time now, we can see Bitcoin's gain subsequently testing its 50 days moving average at this point of time. At time of testing the 50 days moving average, the 50 days moving average was at a price of 5,444. We can see it here. At the time of testing the 50 days moving average, the price was 544. If somebody had bought at the 50 days moving average, that is at price of 544, the next peak was as $19,666, which we can see happened on the date also has been plotted here. Sorry, I did not plot the date, but it happened on it was achieved. When was this achieved? Yeah, here with me please. This was on 1966. 19,666 would have been. Yeah, the next peak was 19,666. I'm not able to locate it right now, but that was the peak. The next peak was 19,666, which would have been sometime here. Yes, the peak of 19,666 was achieved on 17th of December 2017, which was 19,666. You can see from the price here, it was in fact 19,686. As you can see at the top of the screen here, the highest peak price was 19,666. Now that gives us a return of around 3615%. The next peak, as I mentioned some time back, the next halving was again in May of 2020, and before the last retest of 50 days moving average prior to this halving happened on 21st of April 2020, 20th of April 2020, which has been plotted here, 20 April 2020, and the price at that point of the 50 days moving average was at 6,878. At that time, you can see the 50 days moving average was 6,879. Subsequent to that, we all know Bitcoin touched a peak of around $69,000 US dollars, which was here on 10th of November 2021, which gives a return of around 1,003 percentage point. Now, there's one. This would help us to predict the next Bitcoin peak, which we can expect sometime later this year, later in this cycle. Now, currently, this brings to the point of interest in terms of current price and the predicted price for future. Based on precedence, we can see the current 50 days moving average is at around 56,665, and it is inching up. It is also interesting that if we draw the Fibonacci series for Bitcoin from its I've drawn the Fibonacci series from the lowest point of Bitcoin's entire history to the highest point achieved during the previous bull market, and based on this, our the 0.768 retracement works out to around 57,444. Now, this is a very coincidental number that the 50 days moving average is very close to the 0.7 retracement, Fibonacci retracement, which is a very powerful retracement support. Based on this, I expect Bitcoin price to come down to this level, and by the time the 50 days moving average would have moved a little higher. Let me try and draw a line to arrive at in the next couple of days. I believe this should be touching before the end of March, the Fibonacci retracement, and I expect Bitcoin price to come and retrace this figure by within the next couple of weeks. Now, subsequent to testing, what is the kind of gain that we can expect? I believe I'll be going ahead and strongly buying Bitcoin at the price of, at the 50 days moving average, which is around $57,000. I generally do not use leverage but for this trade I will be using leverage because I expect fantastic gains to come from this price. Now, we know that there has been one instance in past where Bitcoin price had fallen below the price at which it had tested the 50 days moving average. That was in 2016. It is therefore not unlikely that Bitcoin this time might again in future go ahead and go below the price of 57,000, but this was only a 33% probability in past, and hence I do not expect it to recur. However, that risk does remain. Nonetheless, I will be going ahead with a small leverage. I do not trade at very high leverages, but this time round, because of my strong conviction, I will be going with a couple of maybe 3 to 5 times of leverage for this trade, which I will hold for a slightly longer time. What do I expect in terms of the price going forward? Now, these gains, as the size of Bitcoin's market cap grows, we cannot keep expecting a 10,000% growth, because that will be super growth and it will be like the highest, that will be the largest asset class in the world. It would be little too optimistic to expect that. Further on, we can see that every cycle on there has been a decline in the percentage return. I was trying to compute a correlation between these increases. As we see that every increase has been around 3 times lesser than the previous increase. For example, from 10,000, one third of that comes to around 3,500. That was the reduction in return between 2012 and 2016. One third of this was around 1000%. That was between 2016 and 2020. Based on this, I expect this gains to reduce to by another one third to around 300% in this cycle. Based on this expectation, the peak of Bitcoin should be around $175,000 in the current cycle. Now, I know there will be a lot of talk about Bitcoin ETF changing everything. That might be true, and I hope that is true, because I am a big investor in Bitcoin and I'm very optimistic about the future. I also believe in the principle of freedom that it allows us all as retail investors. However, as a prudent measure, I would still expect that the peak should be somewhere around 175,000 for Bitcoin. I would of course not sell everything that I have. I have a part of my Bitcoin which is locked forever, and a part that I trade. The leverage trade I will be taking, I would rather like to roll it over till the price of around $175,000. at a leverage of say 5 times, this 300% return could be a fabulous return. Now, coming back to the dates on which we can expect these returns to translate for us. As I was discussing some time back, in past I had made a computation of when I expected the bottom of the Bitcoin for the cycle. Those who are connected to me know this very well. In this, I had plotted the halving dates and the bottom that preceded that halving. In past, in the 2016 cycle, the previous bottom was 540 days, 42 days before the halving. Similar to that, in the next cycle, the bottom was 513 days away from the halving. And based on this, I had taken an average of these two dates, and I was expecting that the bottom of this cycle should happen around 528 days before the coming halving. The halving was initially I had expected back then when I had made the computation almost more than a year back, in the early part of 2020. At that point of time, it was expected that the halving will happen on 15th of March, and based on that, I had computed that our bottom should be somewhere around October of 2020. The actual bottom happened in the mid of November. Now they had done two different calculations for to arriving at another date. I had also expected a date of around 3rd of November 2022. This was based on the peak. Now, if we go by the peaks, if it, every peak has happened. The first peak after 2012 happened on the 30th of November 2013. This was 410 days prior to the next bottom. Similarly, that is the next bottom in January 15. Similarly, the next peak was on 17th of December 2017, which was 363 days subsequent to the previous to the next bottom. Based on this, I had taken an average of these two, and this helped me to compute a date of 3rd November for the bottom of the previous cycle. In fact, I had arrived at this 3rd November figure based on the second peak that had happened on 10th of November. So I had taken an average of 358 days based on the previous precedences and computed that the bottom should happen in November. Bottom happened little later than this, but nonetheless, it was a reasonable amount of accuracy to predict. My strategy generally has been that when I expect the bottom to come in, I start averaging. I will be talking about my strategy in a while. Now, halving to peak, if you see the next peak has happened always around the first peak happened around 526 days after the previous halving of 2016. The subsequent one was 338 days, and the average of these two works at around 432 days. If we go by this, the next halving, now there's one pattern that emerges. The next peak has been, the time has been getting shrunk. So the peak of 20 December 2017 had happened after 526 days of the halving in 2016. The peak of 2021, that the first peak happened in 338 days from the halving of 2020. I understand that some of you would also talk about that this was not really the peak. The peak was really in 10th of November, which was 48 days from the halving of 2020. But most indicators did point that the first peak was actually most of greater significance. But for this computation, to arrive at a time range, I have taken the first peak as the time calculator. It comes out to around 338 days. Now the average of these two works out around 432 days. Based on this, we can expect this halving for the current cycle to happen on between 24th of March, that is 330 days from the expected halving this time round. Or if I take an average, it works out to June of 2025, and if I take the first peak, it will work out to around 500 to September of 2025. Also, if I take the second peak of the current year of the previous cycle, the halving, the top peak can be expected to be on October 2025. So the range that we have is between March till October of 2025. There's also one number I came up with, that was September of this year. This could be in this is because, if I presume the first peak to be the actual significant peak, then there has been a decline of around 100 around more than 100 days, and based on that I can estimate that the earliest the peak of the cycle can arrive would be September. This is highly unlikely. I expect the peak of this cycle to be somewhere between March and September, most likely in June of 2025. This gives some degree of idea. Nonetheless, the topic of this today's video is that I expect Bitcoin, just like it has done in past, to come back and retest its 50 days moving average. Where is that? Now that is an important question, as I discussed some time back. Currently the 50 days moving average is at around 5662 days. I expect it to inch up to around 5700, roughly that figure, before by the time the price hits. Now to plan for it, I am placing certain limit orders at around 57,000 US dollars per Bitcoin with the leverage. This I will hold on to carry. However, this in past it has always hit. It might not necessarily hit. Today, there are two strategies that people can take on this. First is, some people might rather want to go short on Bitcoin at this price and buy at 57. That is a very risky strategy. In my opinion, selling Bitcoin is a bigger risk than not buying Bitcoin at this moment. I would not be selling the Bitcoin even though I expect price to fall in the next couple of days. Therefore, I would not short Bitcoin. I have shorted some altcoins. That's another story. That's my model's prediction. I have certain models that I run that's predicting fall. I have short certain altcoins, but I will not be selling my Bitcoin. I would not be shorting the Bitcoin either. I will be buying Bitcoin at around $57,000. However, to hedge myself against if I am wrong in this estimate, I have been doing a dollar cost average on a daily basis. If you do not know, I will let me know in comments. There is a tool within Binance and several other portals wherein you can set a time bound fixed amount of buying for Bitcoin. I started this time bound Bitcoin buying since November of last year, and I have accumulated good amount of Bitcoin in this time. This helps us to dollar cost average even in the scenario of things going wrong. If you want to know more about the strategy of how to go about this dollar cost on the daily automated buying that takes out the emotion from the decision making process, do let me know in the comment section and I'll get back to you on this shortly. I hope you find this video useful. I know I spoke about many topics at the same time. I might have confused some of them, some of you. If you feel this was not clear enough and if you want me to make a shorter and a more clearer video on this, do let me know. I will come back and make a shorter video on this. Also, if you want to know about more about the strategies that I'm deploying for this expected halving, do let me know that in the comment section also. If you found this video useful, it will be very nice to hear good comments from you on the comment section. Also, hit a like to this video. Also subscribe to the channel with the notification bell turned on. In the next video, I'll be talking about another strategy that I have been wanting to make for a long time. If you go back, I'm putting a link to this video. I had spoken about this video in past couple of months back, but I could not find time to make this video. That strategy is already yielding me more than 50% return, and I expect significant further returns on this. That I'll be covering in the next video. With that, see you in the next video. See you. Take care. Bye bye.